The ancient Olympic Games were not a celebration. They were war without weapons. City-states sent their best men to compete across 4 brutal days in the heat of Olympia. To win was to become immortal, literally. Victors received statues, poems, lifetime pensions. Defeat meant shame that followed a family for generations. The pressure was absolute, and the athletes who kept winning, cycle after cycle, Olympiad after Olympiad, were not simply gifted. They were trained by coaches who had spent generations studying what the human body responds to, what breaks it down, and what makes it adapt. Those coaches arrived at something, a training cycle so precisely structured that modern sports scientists, upon studying it, realized it anticipates almost every principle contemporary periodization is built on. The system had a name. It was documented. And then it disappeared for over 1,000 years. It was called the Tetrad. The Tetrad is the oldest documented periodization system in recorded history. Not a theory, not a philosophy, but a practical training protocol applied to real athletes preparing for the most competitive sporting events in the ancient world. The Greek writer Philostratus documented it in a text called Gymnasticus, written in the 2nd century AD. But the system itself predates his writing by centuries. By that point, it had already been standard practice among Greek athletic coaches for generations. Here is what makes it worth paying attention to now. The cycle Philostratus described maps almost exactly onto the stimulus recovery adaptation model that modern exercise physiology arrived at independently more than 1,000 years later. Most people assume periodization, the idea that you structure training in deliberate cycles, alternating effort and recovery to force consistent adaptation, is a 20th century invention. Soviet sports scientists get the credit. American coaches refined it. The research validated it. The Greeks had it first, and then, somewhere between the fall of their athletic tradition and the 20th century, the knowledge got buried. Here is why this matters beyond historical curiosity. The single most common reason people plateau in training is not laziness, not a lack of effort, and not a shortage of information. There has never been more fitness information available than right now. Programs, protocols, research, endless. And yet most people training consistently for a year look almost identical to where they started. The problem is structural. There is no intelligent relationship between effort and recovery. 2 failure patterns dominate. The first, train hard every session, never build in deliberate recovery, accumulate fatigue faster than adaptation compounds, and eventually stall or break down. The second, take rest days randomly, with no logic behind the timing, and never string together enough consistent stimulus to force real change. Both patterns are recognizable, both are extremely common, and both would have been immediately familiar to a Greek athletic coach from the 4th century BC, because Greek coaches had watched these exact failure modes play out on real athletes in real competition for centuries. The Tetrad was their solution. 4 days, 4 distinct purposes, a cycle built so that every phase has a specific job, and nothing is improvised. Day 1, preparation. The Greek term was katastaltikos, roughly translated as stabilizing or settling. This was not a light workout in the modern sense of going through the motions half-heartedly. It was deliberate priming, short, activating work designed to prepare the nervous system and musculature for the demands of the following day. Volume was controlled, intensity was moderate. The goal was not adaptation, it was readiness. Day 2, concentration. This was the hard day. The Greek term was acme, the peak, full effort, maximum output. Athletes trained at the upper boundary of their capacity because that is where the actual training stimulus lives. Not comfortable difficulty, not effort that could be sustained indefinitely. The kind of effort that forces the body to recognize that its current capacity is not enough. Day 3, relaxation, anesis, near complete rest or movement so light it barely qualifies as training. This day existed for a single purpose, to allow the body to process what day 2 demanded of it. Not because rest is passive, but because adaptation does not happen during effort, it happens after. The training session is the signal. Recovery is where the body responds to it. Day 4, moderation, metrion, moderate work, harder than day 1, easier than day 2, the consolidation day. The body, having recovered from the concentration effort, is now in a state where moderate stimulus can lock in the adaptation without introducing significant new fatigue. The gains are absorbed, the cycle closes, then it repeats. What Greek coaches had identified through observation alone, without laboratories, without measurement tools, was the fundamental architecture of physical adaptation. Apply a training stress, the body drops below its previous capacity. Given adequate recovery, it rebounds above where it started. Apply a new stimulus at the right moment, and the cycle compounds upward. Every legitimate periodization model in modern sports science operates on this same logic. The Greeks did not have a word for supercompensation. They did not need one. They had something more reliable. Centuries of watching what happened to athletes who followed this structure versus athletes who trained without it. The Tetrad translates directly into modern training with almost no modification. Day 1 maps to a preparation session. Lower intensity movement, activation work, priming without accumulated fatigue. Day 2 is the primary training session, the session where real adaptation is forced. Day 3 is full recovery. Day 4 is moderate training, active, purposeful, but held below the threshold that would compromise recovery from day 2. Then the cycle restarts. For bodyweight training, this structure has a specific advantage. It removes the daily decision of whether to push hard or pull back. That decision, made intuitively, based on how someone feels on a given morning, is one of the most common sources of poor training structure. The Tetrad makes it in advance. Effort and recovery are built into the system rather than improvised around it. The No Gym Warrior program is structured around this exact principle, at the session level and across all 3 phases of the 12-week program. The foundation, strength, and peak performance phases each operate as a macro version of the Tetrad cycle, with deload weeks built in at the points where the body needs to consolidate before being pushed further. Link in the description. There is a version of this story that treats the Tetrad as a historical footnote. Interesting evidence that ancient Greek athletic culture was more sophisticated than people assume. That version misses the point entirely. The Tetrad was not a product of ancient genius. It was a product of sustained, honest observation applied to the same problem every athlete and coach is dealing with today. Greek coaches watched athletes train and compete over generations. They noticed what produced results and what produced breakdowns. They discarded what didn't work and kept what did. And over time, a pattern emerged. One so fundamental to how the human body adapts to stress that it did not need to be invented. It needed to be recognized. Modern sports science arrived at the same conclusions through controlled experiments, measurement, peer review, and decades of research. The Greeks arrived at the same place through watching people train until the pattern became undeniable. The principle is not ancient. The principle is accurate. It was accurate when Greek athletes were preparing for Olympia. It was accurate when Soviet coaches were rediscovering it independently in the 1950s. It is accurate now. The Tetrad is not a relic. It is a reminder that the fundamentals of physical adaptation have not changed, and that the knowledge required to train intelligently was available long before anyone built a gym.